Well, welcome to the podcast Ransom for Many. My name's Andy Christofides, and this is a special episode where I'm interviewing somebody and drawing out the story of how they met the Lord Jesus Christ. As we go through Matthew's Gospel, we find many people being drawn by him from a wide variety of backgrounds. And it's good to try and bring that up to date and have some modern stories of how people encountered Jesus Christ. And today we've got an old friend of mine. I hadn't heard from him for many, many years, but he rang me out of the blue about a month ago. I'm going to try and draw out his story. Craig, welcome. Just briefly introduce yourself to us, please.
Hi, yes. My name's Craig McGee. I am a teacher. I'm married with a son. And I'm from a sort of church-going and God-worshipping background and family.
Okay, thank you, Craig. You say you're a teacher. What do you teach? Folks might be interested.
There may be, yes. I teach maths.
Right, they're not interested. Let's press on. How did we first meet? When did we meet, and what occasion was that?
I think the very first time I passed across was a party of my friend Matthew. I think you had just recently returned to Cardiff as an international student worker. I think Matthew's family were overseas students, working with the overseas students at the time. And they'd asked you to come and do an activity and an epilogue at the end of his birthday. I think he was perhaps 17 at the time. And that was the first time I came across you. I remember you posing the question to us, who is your hero? And that was then, but I think the first time we sort of seriously met and spoke were perhaps a couple of years later. I think Matthew, myself, had been to university and we'd come back, we were catching up, and very much felt that God had been working in us and giving us a particular burden for the young people of the church. And we weren't quite sure how to go about this. We kind of felt it would be good to have a meeting, but we didn't know how to do it, didn't know how to plan it, didn't know how to organise it, we didn't know anything. So we came to Newfoundland Road to speak to you. And since then, you've very much helped us with that burden.
Okay, tell us, Craig, how you first met Jesus yourself.
I think I'll preface this answer with how God works in each and every one of us is a mystery, and we can't always be exactly sure of particular dates. I believe that God began his work in me in perhaps the summer of 1984 on a church camp, when I very much became aware that God in Jesus had the answers, that he was the truth. As a 14-year-old boy, my truth was football. And I remember our Dawn Bible study leader dispelling the foolishness of that notion in a very simple and yet powerful way. Okay,
I remember when I started working for the Heath Church as a student worker, you were very enthusiastic. There were quite an enthusiastic group of young people. And I know certainly when you got to your early 20s, you were keen to preach and to minister, and you were making good progress. But then things happened, Craig, and you fell by the wayside. Tell us what happened to lead you away from following Christ.
I think there are a range of factors. Again, that this is 23 years ago. I'm doing my best to be honest with my memories. I've also called upon a couple of friends to ask them how was I in those times. And I think the three, well, they boil down to one, but three factors. I was getting close to be sort of enrolling on a Bible college course to further my sort of desire and I believe calling to work full time with God and his people. Then another factor was that the church I was in was undergoing some turmoil, and it had lost its a vision, and it had become quite a it had become were polarized around two characters, and those characters were looking to recruit their disciples, but were sadly neglecting the work of discipleship and caring for their congregation. And those are contexts. But for me, I got to a point where I felt very lonely. I felt that sort of the lack of company and friendship was strong. There was no one of my age and situation in the church, and that the Bible began to say less to me. I would perhaps, I know on reflections, my reading of the Bible was flawed in that I was reading it for messages for others rather than looking for Jesus myself. But as I aligned myself more with the world and their values, I found that the echo of my heart was found on sort of the world's values and songs rather than the hymns of the church, and God became small in my experience, and God became lightweight and insignificant in my experience, and that was those are details and so on, but it was sin. Sin is what caused it all to happen, and I can talk about bad decisions, but they were sinful decisions, and I understand that and appreciate that.
Okay, so there's a period of steady drift and disillusionment. Perhaps there's not one main factor that happened, but you're aware, looking back, you were drifting. I remember you were telling me you went to, you told your parents on a particular occasion that you decided to no longer follow Christ. Can you tell us about that a little bit? Yes, certainly. That was Christmas, 1998. I went home and I thought, as parents always do, they're concerned for their youngsters, and they were aware that sort of things were changing. But I thought it's best to be just honest and straight. I'm sure I didn't communicate it in a very sensible or sensitive way, but I said that sort of, I'm no longer attending church. I'm no longer following the things of God. And obviously this was very hard for them to hear. But they asked me a question that floored me. It was, well, what do you believe now? What have you replaced your belief in God with? And I hadn't got an obvious, quick, prepared answer, but it was Christmas time. We've been watching TV, and I said, well, the sort of thing that Noel Edmonds does. Noel Edmonds does nice philanthropic work at Christmas time. He goes around, he gives gifts out. I think that's probably what I believe in. So I'd replace God with Noel Edmonds, perhaps the stupidest swap shop event ever. Okay, for those friends listening in America, Noel Edmonds will be totally unknown to you, and it's best he stays unknown. He's a bygone TV presenter in the UK. Craig, so you've made that moved away from Christ. What did you do in the next 20 odd years? What was your life? My life revolved around sort of 3 or 4 things really. There was my family, my wife and son were central. They were all. We adopted Ryan at 15 months, and he has been a tremendous blessing. I was saying to Ryan this week how I felt that he and Mandy were a blessing, and I said, do you know what I mean by that? And he says, what? So it wasn't just chance, it wasn't random. And I said, that's exactly it. It's because they're a part of God's great plan for us. And they were key. I had kept in touch with Christian friends, and they have been very faithful in sort of seeking me out and praying for me. My career progressed. That I got more responsibility and was well thought of in the different schools I worked in.
mostly, and recreation. I continue to enjoy sport, football, and particularly running, and to sort of just see how I could fight off the effects of age. And as I got older, I wanted to run further. And those are the things that I did. But I recall one sentence from a book I read in the 90s, and it was very powerful. It said, if you're trying to be good without God, you are left with nothing. And that's what I had for 23 years. I had nothing to contribute. I mean, the simple answer was they were godless years, in the sense that God was not in my heart and in my mind. Obviously, God was there. God was supporting, protecting, caring. But from my point of view, they were godless years.
Well, that's a really powerful summary. It's worth repeating that. I hadn't heard it before, but good without God is nothing. So take the word good and take God out of it, you're left with a big fat zero. There's much good in the world, and many people do many good things, but good without God is nothing. That's going to appear in a few sermons, Craig. So thank you for that. Something then has led you back to Christ, because you rang me out of the blue about a month ago, and you said, it's Craig McGee here. And I recognized the voice, and I was picturing you as you used to be when you were 25. And I'm looking at you now on the screen. You're not aging too badly, but it was amazing to hear you. And you said, well, I've returned to things I should never have left. That was a very powerful statement. So what led you back, Craig?
I think in the background, and it's important to recognise these things, my parents and my family and friends had been praying, undoubtedly. And I'd, in a way that perhaps you tend to as you get older, I'd appreciated the witness and testimony of creation. It was great to be in, to see, to feel the space and the joy of creation. I know my wife said how much she began to enjoy being in the garden, because it helped her be very grounded in a creator. But January the 3rd, 2020, was a day I will never forget. It was a day when Mandy had not been well, and so she'd had some scans. We went into the consultant to get the diagnosis, and he said it's cancer. He said it's cancer, and you might have a year. And that was obviously still gets me. That death sentence that was issued. We all have it, I guess, but it was particular, and it was devastating. It was life changing though. For Mandy, she began her search. She had a friend who she'd worked with previously who had given her a Bible. She'd left the country and got another job elsewhere, but she'd kept in touch with Mandy. And as Mandy was beginning to face her mortality, Angelina was very helpful. They talked together, they prayed together. I remember walking in to see them praying on the phone, and I felt left out. I felt unsettled. And then a few days later, in the post, during COVID times, I was in charge of opening all mail, and I opened a package from Angelina that had a little gift card in saying to Mandy, "At last we're sisters in Christ." And I felt envious. I was missing out. They had something I didn't, and that began a search. I've been blessed to have had many friends, Christian friends, who have gone on to roles in the church and Christian leadership and preaching. And I started searching them out and searching out their articles and searching out their sermons. It was very clear to me that obviously I needed to start with the Bible. I needed to start with Jesus. I started with Matthew's Gospel. I found downloaded a couple of commentaries on my Kindle so I could understand what I was reading properly. And as I was reading, Jesus became a very powerful presence in my own thinking. And yet I'd also written myself off. I felt that I was part of the parable of the sower, and that I was the soil where the seed landed, but there was no root, just rapid growth, and that was me. So while I believed all these things, I didn't think anything could be done for me. And I was, as I was listening to sermons, and the verse that grabbed me from, I think it's 1 Peter, that said that God desires that none should perish. And that was my lifeline. That is what I grabbed hold of. And the following day, did I feel different? Everything was different. I was thinking about different things. I was thinking about sort of how I could be a good husband, how I could be a good dad, how I could fulfill God's expectations in me, and that was it.
So when was this, Craig? This return? What can you put a date on it?
Yes, it was February the 13th. This year. So
this year,
yeah.
So 5 weeks ago.
Yes.
Wow. Well, that's about the time you rang me then, I think.
I think I rang you the week after. Yes. During that week, I wanted to talk to my son about Jesus, and I asked him. I said, "So, what do you know about Jesus?" And I repeat, we were a godless family. We had no sort of tradition, other than sort of every time we went back to Cardiff, I'd go with my parents to church. But so I said, "So, what do you know about Jesus?" And he said, "Oh, Christmas, the wise men." And I said, "So, yeah, what do you remember about that?" And he said, "Oh, they got some gifts, didn't they, for Jesus?" And he said they were pretty weird gifts, weren't they, Daddy? And if I was a boy, I would not want those gifts. They would be of no interest to me whatsoever. And so I said, I'd seen you. I've been looking at the YouTube uploads, and I knew there was one about the wise men and the gifts, and so we watched it. And I said, "So Ryan, does that help you?" And he said, "Yes, I understand now." And I said, "Oh, that's good. That man used to be one of my best friends." And he said, "Why did he used to be one of your best friends?" I said, "Oh, times change, life changes." And he said, "Daddy, you should get in touch with that man." And here we are.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Very, very good advice. I'm grateful to you for that. Well, look, Craig, it's quite a journey. Would you say there's anything in particular you've learned through this period?
Yes, and I'm still learning. I think that the three things I've learned is one, perseverance. Obviously, doing long runs, you have to persevere. But the flip side of God persevering with me, the absolute stupidity and folly of turning your back on God, and yet He persevered. He was very kind in bringing Mandy to faith. Around the same time as myself,
yeah,
and His love to pursue me to places where I just didn't want God. I didn't want God in my life. I remember being at a service at the church and saying, "I don't want you, God. I don't want you," and yet He wasn't listening. And I'm so pleased He didn't. And so those are the three things. Well, three of the things.
Brilliant.
I have learned and I'm learning.
Good. Thank you, Craig. What is there anything you might say to any backsliders who might be listening to this podcast right now?
I think I'd ask two questions. I'd say, do you realise who you've turned your back on? There's nothing more foolish to turn your back on your Creator and your Saviour. And the second one, which obviously bearing in mind Mandy's illness, it is a question I came across in J.C. Ryle's readings recently, and he said, "Are you fit to die?" And I'll repeat that question. Are you fit to die? I've spent much of the last 23 years making sure I'm fit to run. I'm fit to run 20, 30, 40, 50 miles. But now I realise it's much more important to be fit in God's eyes and fit to die. So those were the questions I would ask and ask of them to consider.
Thank you, Craig. That's really helpful. Great to spend some time with you. Thanks for being with us on this podcast.